It's 10 o'clock. This is Sky News at 10. Our top story. The suspect in the killing of an American CEO pleads not guilty to murder, as his lawyers argue he's not being given a fair trial.
He was on display for everyone to see in the biggest staged perp walk I've ever seen in my career. It was absolutely unnecessary.
The Prime Minister faces a new backlash from business as figures show the UK economy had zero growth during Labour's first 3 months in office. The King's speech with a personal touch, why this year's Christmas Day broadcast will break from royal tradition. Matt Gaetz, a Florida Republican and Donald Trump's original pick for Attorney General, is accused of regularly paying for sex. Plus,
walk this way, talk this way.
The final steps of an epic coastal adventure, one woman's journey around Great Britain, raising money for charity. And we'll take a first look at tomorrow's front pages. That's in our press preview from 10:30. Hello there, good evening. The prime suspect in the high-profile killing of an American health insurance boss has pleaded not guilty to murder and terror charges. Luigi Mangione is accused of gunning down United Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson outside a New York hotel earlier this month. Today, Mangione was brought into one of the city's courthouses, handcuffed and in shackles. The heavy police presence surrounding him today and during his extradition back to the city has prompted defence lawyers to argue the case has become politicised and prejudiced. Martin Brunt has this report.
In America, it's known as the Perp Walk. Officials parading an alleged perpetrator, high profile and often shackled, past media cameras. In court, his lawyer told the judge such a public ritual was unnecessary and prejudicial to his case.
I'm very concerned about my client's right to a fair trial in this case. He's being prejudiced by some statements that are being made by government officials. Like every other defendant, he is entitled to a presumption of innocence.
Mangione is accused of murdering the boss of a health insurance company, shot dead outside a Manhattan conference hotel 3 weeks ago. Brian Thompson was CEO of United Healthcare, the largest health insurer in the United States.
Not guilty.
Mangione denied New York state charges, 11 in all, including murder and murder as an act of terror. If convicted, he could be jailed without parole. But much of the hearing was taken up by his lawyer's objection to the perp walk, especially incensed by Mangione's arrival in New York 5 days ago, guarded with guns, accompanied and later harangued by New York's mayor.
He was on display for everyone to see in the biggest staged perp walk I've ever seen in my career. And what was the New York City mayor doing at this press conference, Your Honor? That just made it utterly political.
The computer science graduate faces a second federal charge sheet. It lists murder, stalking and firearms crimes. For that, he could face the death penalty.
Given how much evidence there is against this defendant, it would be smarter if counsel could provide us with a 2 terabyte external drive rather than rely on the crashing of the portal.
Outside court, protesters voiced support for Mangione and anger at healthcare companies.
Luigi Mangione dropped... Yeah, definitely woo.
There was apparent support for Mangione too on a popular and controversial US comedy sketch show. Mangione will be back in court in February. Martin Brunt, Sky News.
Martin Brunt there on a case that has both captivated and alarmed Americans. Well, NBC's Steve Romo is in New York and sent us this update after the court hearing.
Luigi Mangione making a court appearance today in Manhattan for the 11 state charges that he's facing, pleading not guilty. Now, those charges include 1 count of first-degree murder, 2 counts of second-degree murder, including a terrorism-related offense, along with several weapons charges. We were also hearing from his lawyer in court today, asking for expedited discovery, pointing out that prosecutors have had this evidence for weeks now, saying that they've also been coordinating with federal prosecutors and making a spectacle of Mangione and using him as political fodder, placing the blame on Mayor Eric Adams for that, saying that these perp walks are unnecessary, which continue to take place. Now, the judge said in regards to that he has little control over what happens outside the courtroom, and the prosecutors saying in relation to the discovery that there's a lot of evidence to go through here, but they will do their best to expedite this process, saying they'll give notice on that within the next 15 days. Now, February 21st is expected to now be the next court appearance. In the meantime, Mangione will head back to federal custody. He's also facing parallel federal charges related to these murder allegations, for which he could face the death penalty.
When Labour secured a landslide victory in July's general election, one of the Prime Minister's key pledges was to boost the economy. And yet today, sobering figures showed Britain had zero growth during Labour's first 3 months in office. A survey of business leaders suggested the economy is headed for the worst of all worlds, while the Chancellor has admitted fixing Britain's finances presents a huge challenge, with inflation also rising at its fastest pace for 8 months. Our business and economics correspondent Gurpreet Narwan has more.
A new government, but the shine has already worn off. Labour promised an end to the cycle of economic doom. Yet here we are, zero growth over the summer, and shoppers here in Nottingham know winter won't be any easier.
It's been lovely to come out today, but we perhaps haven't gone out as much. We haven't gone out for meals and things as we perhaps have done in the past.
Everything's just gone up, so yeah. And we've even budgeted for it, you know, and we've still gone over. So just price increase, isn't it?
After rebounding out of recession, the economy flatlined during Labour's first 3 months in power. The Office for National Statistics revised down its estimate from 0.1% to 0% for the third quarter of the year, as high interest rates and weak trade dragged on the economy. The government says it wants the UK to be the fastest growing economy in the G7, but it's going to be an uphill battle. In the third quarter, we were languishing at the bottom of the pile, joint with Italy. But the government says it has a plan.
This Labour government is going into 2025 with absolute resolve to work with investors, wealth creators and workers across the country to stimulate economic growth and improve living standards for workers across the country. This is our number one mission as a government, and we start from a disappointing set of economic statistics as we end 2024, but that's why we're going to fight every day.
But could its mission backfire? Businesses are already warning that Labour's October budget, with its £25 billion tax hike on business, will do more harm than good. A new survey shows businesses are now cutting back on hiring and putting up prices.
No business obviously wants to increase their prices, but what we've been hearing really loud and clear is that the ability to absorb some of these higher cost increases just aren't there for many businesses, particularly given the number of shocks that they themselves have had to face over the last few years.
The signs are bleak. The economy contracted again in October, meaning the final quarter is shaping up to be a tough one.
Labour's fallback has been to blame the economic woes of the country on the previous government. But that window of opportunity is now closing. The budget has created a new harsh reality for businesses. And if it doesn't deliver the economic growth we were promised, the finger of blame could soon point back onto Labour.
The government is calling for patience. But if things continue this way, it could soon be on thin ice. Gurpreet Narwan, Sky News.
Well, our chief political correspondent John Craig is in Downing Street for us tonight. Economy stalled then, John. Business not happy. Not great Christmas news for the PM.
It's pretty grim, yes, and you heard the disappointed tone of the Cabinet, the Chief Secretary of the Treasury, Darren Jones, disappointing, but he talked about the government's resolve to improve things. Well, there's a blame game inevitably going on between Labour and the Conservatives. Downing Street have again talked in response to these figures about that £22 billion black hole. The Tories, on the other hand, are blaming Rachel Reeves and her budget. The only thing is, though, I mean, these figures are July, August and September before the budget. That was on October the 30th. But the CBI forecast of what they call the worst of both worlds, and also the threat of potential recession next year, well, of course, they are blaming those tax hikes, national insurance, in the budget. And also we heard from the Bank of England Governor Andrew Bailey last week making a similar observation. So the government will be desperately hoping that the growth figures are not as bad as feared, but there are real concerns that having promised initially the fastest growth rate in the G7, well, they don't talk about that anymore. That's not going to happen. Struggling to stay afloat, really, and the government goes into the new year with real economic problems and piling up for both the Prime Minister and the Chancellor.
John, thank you. Well, that economic news, sure to feature heavily in tomorrow's newspapers. We'll be taking a first look at the front pages in our press preview tonight at 10:30 and 11:30 with the broadcaster and commentator Alex Andreou and the former Conservative Special Advisor Salma Shah. Now, in a rare break from tradition, the King will deliver this year's Christmas Day broadcast from a hospital chapel rather than a royal palace or estate. It concludes a challenging year for the King and the Princess of Wales, who've both received treatment for cancer. Our royal correspondent Laura Bundock has this report.
It's been a year of huge change and challenge. So no surprise the King wanted to make a statement with his Christmas broadcast, personally choosing a different location. The Fitzrovia Chapel's hidden in the heart of London and built for the staff and patients of Middlesex Hospital.
I assume that this space being one of kind of calm reflection, but also thinking about health, about care and about the medical profession would make it a pretty apt choice.
The King had a wish list for the location, wanting it to highlight health, community and peaceful solace. They are themes close to his heart. His annual address is always a personal message, this year especially a moment to reflect. After his and Kate's dual cancer diagnoses, it's been a turbulent time for the family.
There was a sense that maybe this could be quite a stabilising year for the royal family, quite a calming year, because there'd been a lot of significant changes, quite a lot of upheaval that had come before. And now we were looking to what we thought might be quite an ordinary year, but actually it was anything but.
The King isn't the first to reject royal residences for the broadcast. The late Queen did 3 times.
As with any team, there is strength in combination.
The King, we're told, was bowled over when he came here. He'd wanted an intimate, spiritual space, but above all, a place connected to health, a very personal reminder of the difficult year he and the Princess of Wales have had.
It's hard to predict what 2025 will bring, but in this photo, the King looks relaxed, an unexpected location to end his unprecedented year. Laura Bundock, Sky News, Central London.
Israel has admitted for the first time that it was behind the killing of Hamas political leader Ismail Haniyeh. The country's defence minister said it was responsible for the attack in Tehran on the 31st of July. President Biden has announced he is commuting the sentences of 37 of the 40 people on federal death row. He is downgrading their punishment to life imprisonment. It comes just weeks before President-elect Donald Trump takes office. A man involved in violent disorder in Southport in the summer and who featured in a viral social media clip has been jailed for 2 years and 6 months. In footage shared online, Brian Spencer was seen being hit in the head and groin by, as police say, some wayward missiles. Well, the 40-year-old pleaded guilty to violent disorder and was jailed after admitting racially and religiously aggravated harassment relating to another incident the following day at Southport Hospital, where he verbally abused another patient. Well, these are live pictures now of Hawaii's Kilauea volcano. It began erupting yesterday. The Hawaiian Volcano Observatory has elevated the alert level to warning, meaning a hazardous eruption is underway, but say there is no immediate threat to infrastructure. The volcano is one of the world's most active and has erupted dozens of times since the 1950s. To the war in Gaza now. Many children have suffered catastrophic injuries, but few get the help they need. A small number, less than 100, have been granted temporary visas for the United States to receive treatment after they lost limbs in the conflict. Sky's US correspondent Mark Stone has been following their stories, a warning that his special report contains scenes that some viewers may find distressing.
It's early December, Chicago's O'Hare Airport. And among the hundreds of flights and thousands of passengers, one plane with 8 children aboard. Royal Jordanian Flight 263, and a journey that will change lives. All their stories reflect a collective tragedy. The civilian victims of Israel's bombardment of Gaza. This is Rahaf's story.
Rahaf is almost 3. This is before the incident when she had her legs. And she loved wearing dresses and acting like a princess. It was August 1st, 2024. We were sleeping and I woke up. I looked at Rahaf and practically I've seen blood all over the place.
It's 6 months since the bombing, 3 weeks since Rahaf and her mother arrived in America. And with the family who are now looking after them, we've come to see how a little life is being rebuilt.
Those pictures were when Rahaf first time seen her legs missing.
Goodness. She seems very happy.
شكلها مبسوطة. Now she's feeling much more comfortable.
How do you explain to her what has happened, or is it best not to?
She did ask, like, my legs are destroyed, and we asked her once who caused that. She said a rocket. And after that, she kind of avoids it. If we start a conversation, she will change the subject.
It is hard to comprehend the dilemma of this journey. They'd never left Gaza, now in America, without the language and, of course, without the rest of the family. What about your husband and your sons? How are they doing?
The thing that is always repeated, the question is, when can you come back? When, the little ones, when can we have you back? When can we meet again?
When can we meet again?
My wish is, like, my kids live safely, far from any conflicts and war, safely. That's my wish.
Isra and Rahaf are 2 Palestinians among just a fraction to have been evacuated, less than 100 to America. Fortunate enough to have been identified, selected and extracted through months of negotiations by charities with multiple governments. Israel controls the border. The next stage for Rahaf is prosthetics. It is the kindness of strangers and their donations which will make all this happen. And then it will be time for her to walk again.
1, 2, 3.
A reunion with her family, though, well, that is far less certain. Mark Stone, Sky News.
Now to one woman's epic journey around the UK, hoping to make history and raise money for charity. Today, Lindsay Bell completed her 7,000-mile walk around the entire coastline of Great Britain. Our correspondent Molly Malone was there at the finish line.
Walk this way, talk this way.
She really did walk, and quite the way, having called it Mission Possible. After 10 months on the move, Lindsay's now hopeful of a walking world record. Nearly 7,000 miles and the entire coast of Great Britain on foot. She's a hiking hero.
I feel extremely elated and incredibly grateful that I have been able to walk, meet many thousands of people and be immersed with nature. Hi there, everybody.
It was in the name of the benefits of the great outdoors.
I've arrived!
Raising money for nature and mental health charities.
When you get out into nature, you just have a better time and it's healthy for you.
You proud of her?
Very, very much so.
I've already heard from loads of other people, especially on the walk when I joined her for about a month, and everyone was saying of like the happiness and everything of what she spreads out and in her videos and everything, that it actually does take quite a toll on people, which is really nice to hear.
The route saw Lindsay walk around Great Britain, starting in London, heading around the English southern coastline, then up to Wales and Scotland, before returning back to England, braving every weather condition the country's coastal path could offer. But it started here in Greenwich back in March, and in that time she's covered 3 nations, climbed 3 peaks in 300 days. That's nearly a marathon a day. Quite the achievement. Hugging her relatives she's not seen in months. Hundreds, though, did join her along the way. The hope is to inspire and encourage others to get outside. So, if you haven't got one already, get writing those New Year's resolutions. Molly Malone, Sky News in Greenwich, South East London.
Now, the man Donald Trump first elected to be America's next Attorney General has been accused of paying for sex, including with a minor. The revelations around the former Florida Representative Matt Gaetz emerged in a US House ethics report, which found substantial evidence of misconduct. Well, the allegations include that he regularly paid women for sex. The committee says it heard evidence that Mr. Gaetz had sex with a 17-year-old girl. It also alleges he purchased and used illicit drugs during his time as a member of Congress. Matt Gaetz has previously denied any wrongdoing. Well, NBC's Alice Barr is in Washington for us now. So how is he responding to this then? And what else has the report outlined?
Anna, we have heard from Matt Gaetz today only in the form of a series of posts on his X account on social media in which he is denying again having ever paid for sex. He has repeatedly denied any of these allegations included in this ethics report. He's noted that the Justice Department chose not to charge him after a lengthy investigation of its own, chose not to file criminal charges. And he previously wrote in another posting on social media, quote, "It's embarrassing, though not criminal, that I probably partied, womanized, drank, and smoked more than I should have earlier in life, saying I live a different life now." He also said today that he didn't like that this was a Christmas Eve report released rather than something in a courtroom where he would have the chance to challenge witnesses and to refute the evidence. That evidence is quite substantial, according to what we're seeing from this new report. And committee investigators say they tracked more than $90,000 that Gaetz paid to 12 different women between 2017 and 2020, likely connected, they say, to sexual activity and or drug use. And again, all allegations he denies, but it goes through these claims about illicit drug use between 2017 and 2019, having sex with a 17-year-old girl in 2017, though they did not find evidence that he knew she was underage at the time. Anna.
Alice Barr, live for us there in Washington. Many thanks to you. Thank you. Well, let's get the latest sport now from Sky Sports News and Dave.
This Sky News Sports Bulletin is brought to you by Vitality. Getting more people more active. Live life with Vitality.
remember when I first went on trial at under 9, I just couldn't concentrate. There'd be like games going on and I'd be looking over there. Or I just went off and played club football for a while, went back at under 11s, under 12s. And yeah, I had a lot of ups and downs. There was times where I was 16, you know, when you want to go out and stuff like that. And that's when you truly have to make sacrifices that I found it really difficult. Once I got my feet on the ground and worked hard, then yeah, the journey through the youth team was much easier.
You spent time on loan at Weston-super-Mare. Did the progression from there always seem straightforward?
I always take things, you know, day by day and not look too far ahead. So I was just focusing on progressing and just trying to cement myself in the first team because I didn't see myself as a first-team player then. Yeah, I was just trying to focus on playing, you know, a lot of games and improving and then see where that took me.
And then the moves came, of course, Brentford first and then Aston Villa.
I can remember Brentford, they wanted me the season before, but they said I'd be going into the B team and I didn't want to do that, so I played another full season, got another 30, 40 games under my belt and then went to Brentford and I felt like I was in a much better position. It worked out really well. I think just appreciating the little things is what's helped me. If you can score goals, and you can score goals in any league, and then I think, you know, just keep working hard and just believing in yourself because if you have that belief, then that's the most important thing. And football changes so quickly, so you need that little bit of luck, but if you work hard, then there's no way that you can't succeed and you may get that little break that can, you know, get you a move and it goes on from there.
Loan moves down the pyramid can be crucial for the development of academy players. Look at Harry Kane and his journey to becoming England's record goalscorer. And so many of the top players follow the same path.
Them loan moves weren't to get you out the building for no reason, to get you away from the place. They were to become a Premier League goalkeeper. If you can get out on loan and play the men's game, you know, you'll learn a lot more about yourself, the toughness of it, that winning mentality as well. I learned so much from my first move to Darlton to my last loan move at Preston.
The loans have been phenomenal, from obviously non-league all the way through the leagues, League Two, League One, Championship, and then into the Premier League. So I've sort of played every level of football, and it's all different. The pyramid's different, the league's different.
I felt like I needed to play. I needed first team exposure. I know I was young, I was only 18, but I definitely needed it. I think when you're young, it doesn't matter, I suppose, what level you play at or what team as such, as long as you're getting games and minutes in and they help you kick on and go to the next level, and that's what I did. And not everything went perfect, but that's the whole part of it. That's the whole point.
It's always difficult, probably as a young goalkeeper, the expectation on you coming from Man United. Even though you're young, people just think you can come into the team and you're Superman, but that's not the case. In my Scunthorpe loan, I tasted a bit of everything. I was playing, I made mistakes, got injured, was on the bench. Preston, we ended up at Wembley. Villa, lost the playoff final. It just all add up.
You learn the game management side of it, that winning factor, seeing games out, chasing games. You learn a lot about yourself. Them learning keys are massive. I think it's the best.
This Sky News Sports Bulletin is brought to you by Vitality.
David, thank you very much indeed for that. Just a bit of breaking news concerning the former US President Bill Clinton via our colleagues at NBC News. He is in hospital with a fever. It is not an emergency situation, we are told. He is in good spirits and grateful for the care he is receiving. That is according to Mr. Clinton's Deputy Chief of Staff, quoted as saying by NBC News. So Bill Clinton in hospital with a fever, not an emergency situation, we are told. But we will monitor his progress, certainly. Well, that was Sky News at 10. Coming up, we'll take a first look at tomorrow's newspapers in the press preview. Tonight, joined by the broadcaster and commentator, Alex Andreou, and the former Conservative Special Advisor, Salma Shah. Welcome to both of you. And certainly among the stories, we will be discussing this on the front of the Express. The headline, the King's message of unity and hope at Christmas. That and plenty more in just a moment.
weeknights on Sky News.
This is your chance. Tell people. Welcome to the Politics Hub.
Our police force has apologised. If you want to find out about Grimsby, you come to the docks.
I'm live in Jerusalem.
Are you not concerned that that could lead to all-out war?
Hello there, good evening. There are fears of an upsurge in violence. What's at stake here?
You are watching the press preview, a first look at the front pages as they arrive.
Well, this is Sky News. In just a moment, the press preview, a first look at what is on the front pages. First, though, we now know the content of the Christmas message set to be delivered by the Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer. Well, let's speak now to our chief political correspondent, John Craig, who is outside number 10 Downing Street. A slew of Christmas messages, in fact, John. But first of all, what does the PM say?
Well, Downing Street has announced that the Prime Minister and his family are spending Christmas at Chequers before they head off to for a few days abroad over the new year. Number 10 has announced they're not saying where. And in his Christmas message, the Prime Minister is trying to be a bit more upbeat after the doom and gloom on the economy in recent days and, of course, the dreadful situation internationally, particularly in the Middle East. So in his Christmas message, Sir Keir talks about what's important being family, friendship and fellowship. He thanks the emergency services and the armed forces, predictably, and he goes on about how some families are having a tough time if they're missing a loved one and so on. You're not alone, he says. And then, trying to be much more upbeat after recent gloomy messages, the Prime Minister says this: "This Christmas I will be hoping for peace, particularly in the Middle East, as the birthplace of the Christmas story. And then on the economy, he says, I will be looking towards a better, brighter future for every person and celebrating the joy and wonder that Christmas brings." Now, Kemi Badenoch, the Tory leader, has published a very personal and somewhat emotional message. Now, she begins by talking about Christmas being her favourite time of year, seeing friends, having family around, eating, drinking, having fun, making merry, she says. And but then she becomes more personal and she says this: "I think that Christmas is a time for us to reflect on all that's happened in the year. Sometimes we have amazing years," she says. But then she says, "Sometimes, like when I lost my dad, we have difficult years and we're commiserating, but we do it together." Now, Kemi Badenoch lost her father in February 2022. She has spoken about how he was one of her heroes and taught her so much. Quite a rare personal message there from Kemi Badenoch. And as for Sir Ed Davey, who campaigned and all those stunts during the election campaign, well, he is quite serious in his message, as you might expect. He's talking about carers, something he's campaigned on all year. He's talked about how he's met some amazing young carers, incredible young people, he says. And on carers, he goes on to say this:
"Carers embody the Christmas spirit of love, selflessness, and generosity. So I hope we can all take some time to think of them and keep them in our hearts, and wish them and everyone a Christmas full of peace, joy, and love."
So there we have the messages of the three main party leaders. Sir Keir trying to be a bit more upbeat after the doom and gloom. A personal message from Kemi Badenoch, and a more a sober and sombre message and a campaigning message from Sir Ed Davey. There you have the Christmas messages of the party leaders.
John Craig in Downing Street, thank you. Hello there, you're watching the press preview, a first look at what is on the front pages. In the next half hour then, we'll see what's making the headlines with the broadcaster and commentator Alex Andreou and the former Conservative Special Advisor Salma Shah. Welcome and great to see both of you. So as ever, we take a look at the front pages first, and the Eye says Chancellor Rachel Reeves needs a Christmas miracle to boost the economy. Same story for the front of the Financial Times, as the Chancellor admits she has a huge task to turn around the economy in the new year. Daily Express leads with the King's Christmas message of unity and hope. Front at the Mail, the King on his choice of an ex-hospital chapel for his speech in a message of national healing. And it's the same lead story for the Sun newspaper. Good health, Your Majesty, is their headline. To the Telegraph now, on the front, the paper says it can reveal Royal Mail staff have been accused of faking deliveries to hit targets for bonuses. The Guardian says it can exclusively reveal that Thames Water intentionally diverted millions of pounds pledged for environmental clean-ups towards other costs, including bonuses. The Mirror reports that 7 in 10 people want a bank holiday to mark 80 years since the end of the Second World War. On the front of the Times, more than 10,000 serving sailors, soldiers and aircrew cannot go to war because they've been declared medically unfit. And the Daily Star warns of a Christmas internet overload as thousands of people across the country watch and stream online content. A reminder, by scanning the QR code that you'll see on screen, you can check out the front pages of those newspapers while you listen to our guests. Let's head to Alex and to Salma. Welcome. Thank you for coming in. Christmas week. And it's Christmas messages time, is it not? Starting with the Daily Express on the King. Alex.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the fundamental part of this message is that having had a cancer scare, and a second one, actually, in the family with Kate, they're refocusing on what is it that matters about this holiday. And that's not a bad thing to be putting out there. And we saw that echoed to an extent in most of the leaders' messages as well. You know, we've had so many news in the last 10 days, right? It's usually a period that begins to quiet down, but we've had an overload of news, and all of them take us to the wider picture, to Germany, to the United States, and I think it actually helps to say, let's bring the focus down a little bit. Let's just look at the smaller picture, because how do you make a better future? It is through personal relationships. You know, we're not detached from each other. We are a network to each other. So it's only by building on the love and companionship with those around us that we have a visible effect, right? For ordinary people like us, at least.
Beautifully put, I have to say. That was lovely. And you diverted a little bit to the leaders' Christmas messages, including Sir Keir Starmer's, which we've had. It is time to remind ourselves what's really important, is the quote I think you're probably referring to. Yeah. Family, friendship and fellowship between all people. So how does it all... Has everybody slightly got the same feeling then, do you think, given global affairs are so sort of traumatic to hear day in, day out for people?
Yes, but I think that sometimes, I mean, there's an overload of Christmas messages, and I think you can have a head of state in the form of the monarch that is not political, that delivers something like that and it doesn't feel as cynical. And I do think that, to a certain extent, you know, if you just listen to John Craig talking about his analysis of all the leaders' speeches, there is, perhaps I'm jaded because I've been in politics for such a long time, but there is an element of cynicism to it, I think, because it's sort of engineered in a very particular way to create a certain type of focus. You know, Keir Starmer's going away on his holidays at some point. You know, he's going to be spending some time abroad. Kemi Badenoch is obviously trying to sort of compromise or at least compensate for the fact that she doesn't always come across as personable. And Ed Davey is out there plugging a campaign, as good as it may be. So I sort of feel that there is a tinge of cynicism around those Christmas messages, which makes me actually value the Sovereign's Christmas message a little bit more.
Indeed so. Well, let's take a look at the front of the Sun, also going with it too. Good health, Your Majesty. And this is recurring cancer treatment, isn't it? And I think people genuinely feel, you know, that headline sings for them too. Yeah. And his Christmas message will focus on health workers as well, who have proved so vital to him and proved so vital to the UK.
To all of us. I mean, it was only... it was less than 4 years ago that we were standing on our doorstep applauding people who were literally putting their life in danger in order to help us during that very difficult situation. And I find it extraordinary how quickly that has faded from memory in a strange way. We found in our isolation during the pandemic, we found actually an extraordinary amount of togetherness because it was something that we were going through all together. And when I see the King and Keir Starmer and Badenoch, to a certain extent all of them, echo this message of unity, what that says to me is that that's what they're worried about. This feels like a country that is fracturing a little bit, where fissures are appearing, and it's, you know, it's fragmenting a little bit, and people dislike each other because they let politics get in the way. And that's why I think it's so important to say, go back to the personal. This Christmas, we're all going to be spending time with people who disagree with us on a whole host of stuff. And yet we find a personal way to relate to them, to be in the same space as them, to share other things with them, to share food and presents. And, you know, and there's a lesson there, right? That you don't have to agree on everything. You don't have to have this negative vetting where, you know, if you have one view that I find unpalatable, that's it. I put a big X through you, and your entire being is alien to me. You know.
Well, you're sort of feeding me the lines to go straight back to Sir Keir Starmer's message, actually, as well as dealing with the economic inheritance, which I know we're going to come on to momentarily. Sir Keir said he needed to fix a broken society, which manifested itself in summer riots across the country after the Southport knife attack. I mean, it is a wonderful message you're saying, but actually, politics and people are polarised now. We've seen it in America, we see it here in this country. You know, whether you can right that ship or whether people want to right it is another matter, I think.
Indeed, some of the choices that he's going to make to do that, because there was a strength of feeling at the time. You know, actually, the three of us discussed it as those riots unfolded, which is, you know, the two-tier Keir accusations, the way that the court processes were run for the riots, but not for other things. So there is still a lot of anger and resentment, and I think we can have calls for unity, but we actually have to be very honest about why those things are breaking down. Just to sort of talk, unfortunately, to talk about the King's Christmas message, there is something that I find very interesting about this, because the stories are really about the fact that there's been a departure from not sitting behind a desk in the palace, you know, as was the late Queen's style. So we are seeing, in the way that the British monarchy has always evolved, these tiny little subtle changes that actually are enormous if you think about, you know, how the palace is going to think about it and the signal that it sends. And it is a bit more of an approachable monarchy. The fact that he's talking about, or will be, according to the reports, his own cancer diagnosis, you know, something that even 30 years ago, 40 years ago when I was born, was unthinkable for the sovereign to reference their own personal health in this way. So these tiny little things that are sort of not very necessarily obvious to us, the fact that it's not in a palace, the fact that he is referencing his own story to make it relatable to the story of all these people, I think is a really interesting thing.
And that beautiful tree, we found out today, it had been kept secret, has been donated to a hospice, the oldest hospice, I think, in the UK. And so they will, you know, the visitors there and people there will enjoy looking at that tree and can see on the Christmas message day on the broadcast, which was produced by Sky this year, that it's their tree that they see on their TV screens. In the meantime, let's move on to the economy. You slightly feel that the over-optimistic tone, perhaps in Sir Keir Starmer's Christmas message, or optimistic, not over-optimistic, I should say, is to divert attention from the economic news we're having and the reports from business leaders, too, in terms of their confidence in whether they invest or not. And this suggestion that Rachel Reeves needs a Christmas miracle to boost the economy, you know, this is not a great reading for numbers 10 or 11, is it?
No, and you know, there has been a nexus of things, some of which were mistakes by the government in things that it did or the way it did things, some of which are part of the inheritance that it got from the previous government. And the fact that there was, you know, and I'm sure Salma will agree with me, there is a tendency towards the end of an administration when you know you're probably going to be out, to put a few difficult things in drawers and say, let the next people deal with this review and that wage demand, etc., etc. So yes, there are things coming together, but the economy, strangely, is a creature that does depend on psychology. And optimism, as opposed to pessimism, does affect business confidence, consumer confidence. So it's one of those strange things where the messaging does matter, and where I think Labour are now realising that they went overly glum and overly pessimistic at the start, and this is why we're seeing effectively the economy grind to a halt, stagnate, not necessarily go down, but stagnate, and it's not what they want, obviously. So they're trying to sort of change their attitude to a slightly more positive.
Yes, certainly. Let's look at the Financial Times as well. Reeves's New Year challenge laid bare as economic growth grinds to a halt, flatlining effectively. Yes.
So the reason this is interesting is because we are now getting groups like the Confederation of British Industries actually coming out and saying this is really hampering us. We previously had sort of the British Retail Consortium and other large employers saying that they had been massively affected. And what this is saying, and from a couple of independent sources, economists like Capital Economics, saying that actually growth has ground to a halt. So it is very difficult to say that you're coming in to find growth, which was the core Labour message, and then finding that actually the actions that you have taken has actually eliminated any growth that was projected previously. So this is pretty catastrophic for British business, although, you know, we have previously discussed, people obviously still hold the Conservatives responsible for it, but there are choices.
Well, I mean, it's a stagnating quarter. Catastrophic, I think, is slightly over-putting the emphasis.
We'll see. Next year. Lots more still to come in the next part of our programme, including another effectively business story, how millions of passengers are taking to the skies as airlines brace for their busiest Christmas season ever. Back in a moment.
Paris reverberated to the sights, sounds and smells of conflict. There's a focal point to all this anger, and that is Emmanuel Macron. I'm Adam Parsons, Sky's Europe correspondent based here in Brussels. There are dozens of people desperately clambering to get onto that boat. It is a chaotic scene, but it's being watched by dozens of French police officers on the beach. I've reported on migration across Europe, close up on the ground, understanding that sense of desperation and meeting the criminal gangs behind it. This old fishing boat set off from the Libyan port of Tobruk. There were 606 people who were on board. So we've been distributing life jackets to all the people on board this boat, and now the first person is coming on board. This is the ugly side of Italian football.
In Italy, everything is really organized.
Football's problems with hooliganism, racism were just dormant, and now they're back and they're getting worse. We cover so many countries, languages and cultures and work hard to gain trust to bring you the full story first. Help is slowly reaching these places. It's not just homes, but whole streets like this one that have been reduced to rubble and dust. This is a picture of destruction. Everywhere you look in this mountaintop community, there is absolute devastation. These are the settlers in waiting, keen to start a new life, to annex Gaza for Israel.
The least we can do is just kick them out of our land.
Gaza, which is just 2 miles in that direction, is under attack again. Getting the chance to tell people's stories, it's a privilege.
Gives you the very best of Sky News wherever you are. Breaking news, videos and analysis.
Evidence of the crisis.
Podcasts, watching us live.
Live here from Washington.
Wherever you get your podcast.
All in one place. And all at just the touch of a screen. The Sky News app. Get the full story first.
I'm James Matthews and I'm Sky's US correspondent, based here in Washington, D.C. Donald Trump, it would appear, is about to learn his fate. There's no doubting the strength of this hurricane as it roars through. Sky News, get the full story first. Do you fear a fourth indictment? Is it a draw?
He's from Sky News. He's from Sky News. He's entitled to ask me questions.
There's always more to the news than a headline. We want to discover, to delve a little deeper, to find out what's really going on. Explanation, analysis, the people at the heart of every story. I'm Neil Patterson, and this is the Sky News Daily Podcast. So, by the end, we'll hopefully all understand what's going on in the world just that little better. Available wherever you get your podcasts.
Well, welcome back. You are watching the press preview with me now, Alex Andreou and Salma Shah. Welcome back to both of you. Let's go to the front page of the Daily Mail. Their lead story is about the King's message, but on the front page also is a picture of Bashar al-Assad and his wife, with the rumours, speculation and stories that she wants to divorce him and come back to the UK and needs health treatment. Have you managed to get to the bottom of what the truth is in this, or do we still not know?
I'm afraid, well, I do not know. Maybe we'll be enlightened when we get the inside pages of the Mail.
It seemed to have a Russian denial today, is why I throw it out there.
There's been a denial. Asma al-Assad has publicly said that she was treated for leukemia. There has been some discussion about another cancer that may have affected her, again, something that I can't verify. But there are questions, I think, around her treatment in Moscow and other questions that have existed about the fact that she is a dual national with both British and Syrian citizenship. So there has been some question as to whether she might want to return for treatment. There has been some question as to whether it might be a way, or perhaps even talking about a divorce, might be a way for redemption, so that she may be able to return. But as I say, this is rumour and speculation.
Does she have an automatic right of return, or could she be refused?
She could, I think, having worked in the Home Office, I think she could potentially be refused if the Home Secretary takes a decision to strip her of her citizenship, so deprive her of citizenship, because she would not be rendered stateless, which is the only way that would be illegal. And if she still has recourse to her Syrian citizenship, then maybe, I mean, we would probably need to talk to a lawyer about this, but there is a possibility, I think, that could happen.
It's very interesting, isn't it, either way?
It is very, I mean, it's very interesting always in these situations to see power drain away from the people who had it, in this case Assad, and people beginning to peel off him. And, I mean, we will see what happens, but people who have ceased to be useful to Putin and become quite troublesome in this kind of situation, they don't tend to do very well in Russia, so...
Well, yeah, exactly.
We will see.
That's partly why it's also interesting, isn't it? Yeah. Very quickly, two stories. I'm not sure we're going to get them in. We've only got 1 minute. FT, airlines end the year on a high after a rush for Christmas getaways.
All I can say is this really surprises me. There's an uptick in people wanting to travel on Christmas Day. The last place I want to be at Christmas anywhere near is an airport.
I thought you were going to say in our miserable weather, but it's actually looking a little bit better. Royal Mail story, front page of the Daily Telegraph. Just very quickly outline the accusation then here, if you can.
That basically people come round with a pre-written card that says, we tried to deliver your parcel, but you weren't in, without actually trying to deliver the parcel. So there's some kind of rationing going on. And I think many of us may have a suspicion that several courier companies may do that occasionally when you go to the door and find a card and you think, I was in, I haven't left this house.
The suggestion seemed to be that that's happening because there's a bonus structure in place if you meet your targets. The Royal Mail statement is there is no bonus incentive that would encourage items to not be delivered. That would be counterintuitive to our business as a delivery company, their response to that Daily Telegraph story. Goodness, we need more time, don't we? Certainly. Alex, Salma, thank you both very much indeed. See you next time. All the top stories coming up for you in Sky News at 11.
There's always more to the news than a headline. We want to discover, to delve a little deeper, to find out what's really going on. Explanation, analysis, the people at the heart of every story. I'm Neil Patterson, and this is the Sky News Daily Podcast. So, by the end, we'll hopefully all understand what's going on in the world just that little better. Available wherever you get your podcasts.
We've got your Sunday mornings covered. From the front page and the sounds of the streets to the voices of the people who make the major calls and big picture politics beyond Westminster. We'll put you at the heart of our story. A new start to Sunday.
I'm ready. Are you?
Join me, Trevor Phillips, Sunday mornings on Sky News.